So thrilled to once again be joined by our guest, former big league catcher for the Montreal Expos and host of Blue Jays Central on Sportsnet, Joe Siddall. Welcome back to the Walk-Off. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, guys. The off season is rolling along with these winter meetings, and hopefully we have a lot of good things to talk about real soon.
Yeah, I know Blue Jays fans are in a little bit of panic here. Obviously, we'll get into that. I will start with just saying congrats on another great broadcast season, my guy. I always really enjoy the way you're able to take little plays or isolated incidents within the game and kind of break down the nuts and bolts, kind of give us laymen behind the scenes view of baseball. And it's really enjoyable, man. So well done.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you kindly. It's certainly what I love to do. I mean, that part of the game as a catcher, the minutia, the game within the game, as I always like to call it. It's the part of the game I love so much. It's probably what I love so much about the catching position, because there are so many things going on. How many times have I been asked that, why do catchers make good managers? Well, it's because the entire game is in front of them, for one, but number two, it's in their mind the whole time, every pitch. The wheels are spinning 1 and 2 and 3 pitches ahead. The next hitter, 2 hitters ahead. So there's that constant thought process happening. And I don't think it's by coincidence we see a lot of catchers sitting in that manager's chair, John Schneider being one of them.
You know what, Joe? I was going to wait on this question, but this is actually the perfect kind of transition here, because I do want to talk catching with you. It is your forte after all. It's also the Blue Jays' area of strength. We're all well aware that even as we watch free agency unfold, it's looking more and more like the Blue Jays are probably going to make a trade to bolster some of their areas of need, using a catching position, their area of strength. Not necessarily, but it looks like it's probably going to happen. And I know the fan base is always back and forth. Who do they trade? Why do they trade this guy? Why would they trade that guy? I don't necessarily want your opinion on that. What I want to know is the importance of experience. So I'm a big nerd, Joe, and I actually went over the last 10 years of World Series champions. And I took every catcher on those World Series rosters and accumulated their years of catching experience. Every single one of those teams had over 10 years of experience, other than the Los Angeles Dodgers in 2020 with Will Smith and Austin Barnes, and they still had 9 years of experience. How important is having that veteran catcher when it comes to winning games?
So I think it's critically important. I'm sure you've seen me tweet about it, talk about it on the broadcast. It's something that I feel for a team that is ready to win now, and we know that the Blue Jays are there, or for any team that's competing. Do you have to have that? I don't think you can ever prove that you have to have any single piece on a baseball team, because there are so many variables, not to mention just the month of October in general. Crazy things happen in October. Teams can go on great runs. The Phillies had Real Muto behind the plate. Was that a coincidence? I think not, but maybe if they had a catcher with 2 years experience, that team still goes on an amazing run. So there's the crazy thing is you can't quantify it. You can't really prove it, but you're asking me the question, do I think it's important? Absolutely. I think it's important. And I think it's important for probably different ways than most people think. It's not just a generic thing. I think calling a game is the most critical part for a catcher behind the plate. Now, it's important in April, it's important in June, it's certainly important in October, but I think by having that veteran presence back there, and that doesn't mean that if you have 5 years of major league service time, you're not a veteran, but you're not a veteran in the terms I'm talking about of being in command back there, especially if you've been a guy that's already been to the postseason once or twice or 3 times. Maybe you've even won a World Series. And again, those are random things, and you probably played on pretty good teams, but I go back to a couple things, and you hate cherry picking little incidents, but I watch games pretty closely. And the things I go back, and I know probably where you're going with this question, is I've been critical of the Blue Jays situation behind the plate and the lack of experience for a team that is trying to go and make it. I keep saying make a deep run in October, because I don't think anybody can say, let's go win a World Series. Again, it's somewhat random, but I think of a Danny Jansen, I think of an Alejandro Kirk, and I hear all of the accolades that I'm probably in the minority. And I'm not saying I don't like those guys. Alejandro Kirk did a phenomenal job behind the plate. Danny Jansen does a very good job. I thought his receiving really took a step backwards this year. I will be asking Danny about that in spring training, like what is going on with his receiving technique. because it's not good. Alejandro, on the other hand, made great strides. He was fantastic. But I look at a couple of situations, if you think of those final 2 games of the season, and I'll be quick. One was Kirk with Manoah early on, Cal Raleigh. Caleb Joseph and I said on our show with Jamie Campbell, Alek Manoah cannot let a left-handed batter beat him. He absolutely dominates righties. What do? Cal Raleigh, left-handed hitter, hits the big home run early in that ball game. Now, maybe it didn't matter because Luis Castillo's on the other side, but you can't think that way, though.
No.
To me, that was a mistake. That's where a veteran catcher has to step up and say, listen, Alek, no, we're doing this right here. Because Alek's a big personality. We know that. And I mean, how can we accuse him of doing anything wrong? I mean, we'll go with him any day of the week. But I think that's a mistake. And it was a costly mistake. The other one was when, and I was critical of John Schneider's move, bringing Tim Meza in for Gausman in game 2. You bring Meza in, the wild pitch. After that wild pitch, why are you letting a right-handed hitting Santana beat you? There is no chance he should have beat you. You got a lefty on deck, and if they do pinch hit, you've got a secondary bench guy coming in. But don't let Carlos Santana beat you against Tim Meza, a lefty, because we know Tim had struggled against righties. So to me, that one's on Danny. The first one's on Kirk. That one's on Danny. I'm cherry picking. That's just one example of each, but that's what I mean. I use those examples because that's what I mean when I refer to that. It happens throughout the course of the season too, but 6 months of a season, you can cite so many different examples, but those particular instances are why exactly. Now, does it mean if a veteran Russ Martin's back there, that doesn't happen? We can't prove that. But yeah. I like my chances. And might as well mention Russ Martin's name. I still go back to what the Blue Jays did way back there. The integral part for me was Russell Martin behind the plate. There's a guy that's been to the postseason a million times and can call a game in his sleep.
There is something to be said for recognizing a situation. And this just goes for life. This isn't just catching. Experience matters. Right? Like being put in situations and knowing how to react matters. I mean, Adam and I are stand-up comedians, and I know that there are a ton of really funny comics within that first year to 5 years. But until you kind of go through the rigors of experiencing everything that could happen throughout a show, you don't know how to respond to certain things until you're put in that situation. And I guess what I want to do here is ask you if you feel that whatever they do catching wise, if this team could benefit from having a Christian Vasquez, a Zunino, somebody like that added as not even their everyday catcher, but just a guy that these kids, even Danny Jansen, can go to and pick their brains on certain things.
I do. It's my personal opinion. I know I'm in the absolute minority because everyone loves the Blue Jays catchers, and I do too. Mm-hmm. But for a team that is ready to go now, like we're not talking now about building for 24 and 25 and 26 anymore. That was like 4 years ago. We're here now. We are here. These last 2 seasons have been that window, and moving forward, the next couple, guys, pretty soon, Bo and Vladdy might be gone. And quite frankly, I use Bo and Vladdy's names. We might as well put Alek Manoah's name in there too, because to me, that's the core of this team. Of course, you add a Springer. I get that, and a Gausman and Barrios, those are wonderful complementary pieces. But let's not kid ourselves. The backbone is Bo and Vladdy, and I still think they will be for the next few years before they become free agents, unless they're locked up before then. But I call window because, listen, we're going to hear executives always say, well, our goal is to be competitive each and every year all the way into the future. Well, how realistic is that? Every team kind of has those ups and downs, those 3 or 4 year windows up, and then they go down for a few, and then they go back up. This to me is a window, and you've got, if Vladdy can get back to being Vladdy, it's another question too, but that's that MVP caliber Vladdy. He can carry this team. We know that. We saw it last year. And if Bo, I still think, Bo to me had a terrible season by Bo Bichette standards offensively, but he still, the way he bounced back late, he was so good. My point is, I think Bo is a guy that can win a batting title. He is tremendously talented. I think it's going to continue to show as we move forward. So these 2 guys are in their primes right now. Not even their primes. They're still young, but I would consider them their primes because they're so darn good. My point is act now. And yes, I do think that would help. But again, I know it's not going to happen because they've got 3 guys. But when you look at the 3 catchers the Blue Jays have, I mean, yeah, sure, Danny's your most veteran guy, if you want to use that word veteran and experience. But I just finished saying he had a horrible year receiving the baseball. And I'm saying that to you, and I'll be talking to Danny when I go down to Florida in March. I'm going to say, Danny, what went differently? What went wrong? Why? And I'm going to tell him what I saw, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say, because on a lot of occasions it wasn't good.
Now, obviously, it's not all about experience, but this did stand out when I saw the numbers. Travis d'Arnaud, World Series champion with the Atlanta Braves in 2021. He had 5,431 innings under his belt. Danny Jansen right now has 2,407, and Kirk and Moreno combined has 1,180. It's pretty big difference there.
It is. And I'll keep saying it. Like, we can't prove that a veteran catcher helps you go deep in the postseason. But yeah, the numbers you rattled off there. And again, Danny's the most experienced of that group. But how much of that experience is in the middle or late part of October when you're in crunch time? None of it. None of it. And when you look at guys you mentioned, like a Vasquez, Zunino, different guys, will they take the Blue Jays to the promised land late October? No way of proving it. But I know if I were in charge, I'd be thinking more along those lines. Now, how you do that is another question altogether, because number one, with free agents, excuse me, it's a two-way street and you got to get them. But Danny, to me, holds probably the least value in trade because he only has 2 years of experience left. And I can't wait to see what happens, Danny, because we keep hearing of all these rumors here, there, and everywhere. Well, for a guy that struggled the way he did receiving the baseball last year, is that who you want catching every day for your team? I'm very intrigued to see where he goes, if anywhere. And the flip side of that is you got like an Alejandro Kirk. Well, yes, he's a wonderful catcher. Yes, he had a great year offensively. He's a silver slugger and an all-star, all those great things, but he can't catch every day. He can't catch 5-6 days a week. We saw that, or at least that's not what the Blue Jays thought. So he is at his best when he's maybe catching a few days a week, DH. And so to me, he's your perfect backup. Catch 3 days a week, DH 3 days a week. He got his lineup in there 6 times, roughly. And then for Moreno, who knows? I don't know if you guys know what Moreno's going to be in the future, but I sure don't. We hear a lot of great things. He might not even be a catcher. He might be a really good contact type hitter. He might end up playing the infield a lot. Like, who knows? So if you're the Pittsburgh Pirates right now, like if the Blue Jays were the Pittsburgh Pirates right now, then sure, you put all your chips in the Moreno basket and hope he's your catcher of the future for the next 6 years. But that's not where the Blue Jays are right now. So to me, he holds tons of value if you do have to make a move.
That's a great point about where the Blue Jays are at. Obviously, this front office would operate differently if this was back in the 2019 days, right, when they were still in a rebuild. But this is kind of they're in their window, right, to win now.